We kick things off with Paul Kersey, an architect based in New York, wrapping up a relaxing getaway with his wife Joanna. The trip is everything a vacation should be: warm, quiet, and far away from the chaos. But the moment they touch down back in New York, that peace disappears fast. Back at the office, Paul's coworker gets fired up about how bad crime has gotten in the city. The guy thinks the solution is simple: crack down hard, no mercy. Paul doesn't see it that way. He understands that poverty plays a big role in crime and refuses to write people off just like that. His coworker shakes his head and slaps the word liberal on him. Not long after, Joanna and her daughter Carol Toby head out for a grocery run at a nearby store. Three troublemakers are already inside, stirring things up. Joanna and Carol place a delivery order and head out, not realizing that those same three men clocked everything, including the address written on the delivery slip. Just like that, they know right where to find them. The men waste no time. They tail the women straight to their building, slip inside, and show up at the apartment door pretending to be delivery guys. Carol falls for it and opens up. The moment she does, the men push their way in. They rough up both women and demand cash. All Joanna and Carol have is $7. That answer sets them off. One goes after Carol while another slams Joanna's head hard. On the way out, Joanna gets hit again. She is left in terrible shape. Carol barely manages to drag herself to the phone. Paul is still at his desk when Jack Toby, his son-in-law, gets through to him. Paul figures it is some kind of domestic issue at first. Then the real news drops. Both women are in the hospital. He races over and connects with Jack. A cop named Officer Joe Charles stops by briefly, gives them the bare minimum, and takes off. Paul pushes for answers, but nobody gives him a straight one. A doctor eventually comes out and delivers the worst possible news. Carol made it. Joanna did not. The funeral comes and goes in a blur. Carol attends but is barely present. The trauma has hollowed her out completely. Jack tries to get Paul to come back with them afterward, but Paul needs space. He says his goodbyes to Carol, even though she barely registers that he is there. He lingers at Joanna's grave one last time before turning and walking away. A couple of days pass before Paul heads down to the precinct to follow up with Officer Joe Charles. Charles points him toward the detective on the case. The detective lays it out plainly. A handful of people at the store may have seen the men, but nobody can put a name to a face yet. Jack had kept Carol away from police questioning for her own sake, but Paul agrees to address that. Right before he heads out, the detective levels with him. The odds of tracking these guys down are not good. Back at home, Jack is struggling to reach Carol. The smallest physical contact sends her spiraling. Meanwhile, Paul stares out his window one evening and catches a group of guys breaking into a car on the street below. The following day, Paul picks up $20 worth of quarters from work and drops them into a sock. His boss, Henry Ives, floats a project in Tucson his way, but Paul asks for some time before committing. He checks in on Carol later and does not like what he sees. She is sleeping way too much. He pushes Jack to get her a second opinion. Jack mentions he has already been thinking about getting her out of the city for a while, and gently tells Paul that his presence might be doing more harm than good right now. Paul does not take that well, but eventually he comes around. He takes the Tucson job to get his head straight. On his way home one evening, a man steps into Paul's path and demands money. For the first time, Paul does not back down. He pulls out the coin-filled sock and goes to work. Then he bolts home, legs shaking the whole way. He pours himself something strong and tries to get his breathing under control. Paul heads out to Tucson, where he links up with a property developer named Ames Yanshil. Ames walks him through the land and breaks down what he is hoping to build. He takes Paul out to a film shoot one afternoon, a big Western brawl scene playing out in front of them. That evening, they end up at a shooting club for dinner. Ames notices right away that Paul handles a gun like he has done it before. Paul explains he served as a combat medic during the Korean War. He was a conscientious objector, so he never carried a weapon into battle. But his dad was a hunter and got him comfortable with firearms early on. That ended when a hunting accident took his father's life. His mother made him give it all up after that. A few weeks in, Paul wraps up the project and Ames could not be happier with the work. He drives Paul to the airport when it is time to go and slips something into his bag without making a big deal of it. Ames has taken a real liking to Paul and even throws out the idea of relocating to Arizona someday. Paul lands back in New York and Jack is there waiting. Paul looks around, expecting Carol to be with him. Jack stalls. Then he comes out with it. Carol has completely shut down. She is catatonic. Paul loses it. He goes after Jack for not doing enough, then turns his anger toward the medical team handling her care. They go see Carol at the psychiatric ward together. Paul holds her, but she looks right through him, like he is not even there. The insurance is running out, and the doctors are already talking about moving her to an asylum. Jack breaks down. He feels like the system has reduced his wife and mother-in-law to case numbers. There is nothing left to do about it. Paul gets back to his apartment and finds the vacation photos waiting for him. He flips through them slowly, staring at Joanna alive and smiling. Then he opens his bag and finds what Ames left behind. A revolver, sleek and loaded with meaning. That same night, Paul takes a walk through the city. Cutting through a park, he picks up on someone shadowing him. The man eventually closes in, pulls a weapon, and asks for money. Paul does not hand anything over. He draws and puts a bullet in the man's gut, then gets out of there before anyone shows up. Once he is back inside his apartment, reality hits him like a wave. He makes it to the bathroom just in time. The next morning, cops show up to the scene and run the dead man's record. Turns out he had a long list of priors. Paul is back at work by then, and Henry comments that he looks like he is doing better. Paul quietly agrees. On another night out, Paul comes across a group of guys working over a businessman on the street. He does not cross to the other side. He walks straight at them. The muggers flash their weapons. Paul answers with his. One tries to bolt. Paul runs him down. Police show up and try to get the businessman to talk, but he gives them absolutely nothing. Paul and Jack go together to check on Carol, who has been moved to a Christian facility run by nuns. Jack is done with this city, says they should have gotten out a long time ago. Paul disagrees. He believes the answer is not running, it is pushing back. The police are now fully focused on a string of street killings that seem connected. Inspector Frank Ochoa pulls his team together and lays out his read on the situation. This is not random. Someone is out there with a mission, not a career criminal. A vigilante working his way through the city, one criminal at a time. One evening, two men get on a city train and start sizing up the passengers. They eventually make their way to a car where Paul is sitting by himself with a newspaper. The other passengers clear out at the next stop. The men move in. One covers the door while the other moves on Paul. Paul stays completely still. Then he takes out his gun and drops them both before slipping off the train. The department holds a press conference calling out the vigilante and demanding he turn himself in. A reporter asks whether street crime going down has anything to do with this person. The police brush that off. Meanwhile, Ochoa finds grocery bags the shooter left behind at one of the scenes. The receipt inside could crack the case wide open. Jack drops by Paul's place and cannot quite put his finger on it, but something feels off. Paul is in a great mood. Cooking, playing records, mixing drinks. Jack asks what is going on. Paul tells him simply that he is done grieving. Later, Paul walks into a bar and makes a show of pulling out a thick roll of cash. The right people notice. Two men follow him out. Down in the subway corridor, they close in on him with knives. Paul shoots one dead and puts a bullet in the other, who gets away. He reports the attack to police before jumping on a train and disappearing. Back at home, he notices he got sliced during the scuffle. He patches himself up. The wounded man ends up in the operating room with Ochoa right outside the door. Before the man dies on the table, he manages to tell officers that he cut whoever shot him. Paul catches the news that evening and hears that the men he killed were all known criminals with records. What catches his attention even more? Regular people are starting to fight back. An old woman fended off two attackers. A crew of construction workers cornered a mugger and nearly finished him themselves. Ochoa keeps grinding through his list of possible suspects. He gets it down to 14 names. One of his officers zeroes in on Paul. Ochoa has someone tail Paul while he heads to the apartment himself, talks his way past the building manager, and goes through the place. What he finds, bloody bandages in the trash and stacks of news clippings about the vigilante case, is enough to all but confirm it. Ochoa takes everything to the district attorney expecting action. Instead, he is told to let it go. The DA explains that making Paul a public figure would be a disaster. Crime is down. People are feeling it. Arresting the man responsible could set something off they cannot contain. The plan is simple. Get Paul out of New York quietly and keep it that way. Ochoa hates it, but falls in line. Ochoa rings Paul directly and lets him know the police are watching him closely. That same night, he sends officers over to give Paul a rough warning. They are looking for someone who looks just like him. Days later, Ochoa and a partner are parked outside Paul's building, keeping eyes on it. Paul suits up nicely, but instead of walking out the front, he slips out the back. Ochoa sends someone to call the apartment. No answer. He moves fast, but Paul is already gone. Paul retrieves his gun from the office. Ochoa gets there right after and finds nothing. Out in the park, three men jump Paul and demand his wallet. Paul bides his time, then goes on the attack. He gets a shot off, but takes one in the leg during the scuffle. He chases the last man into a warehouse he knows from work. He uses that knowledge to cut him off and get the drop on him. He gives the order to draw. Then his body gives out and he hits the ground. The last man walks. Officers secure the scene and reach Ochoa. One of them picks up Paul's gun and passes it over. Ochoa looks at it for a moment, then tells the officer he never saw it. Paul comes to in a hospital bed with Ochoa sitting nearby. The deal is laid out clean. The gun disappears. The story stays buried, and Paul gets out of New York for good. Paul shakes on it. His firm arranges a transfer to Chicago. For the press, Ochoa keeps it simple. Paul was just another mugging victim. The vigilante is still out there somewhere. Nobody asks too many questions. Paul touches down at Chicago Union Station and is met by someone from the company. Before he follows them out, he notices a group hassling a woman nearby. He steps in without hesitation. When they laugh at him, Paul just smiles, raises his hand, and points 2 fingers at them like the barrel of a gun. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.